They're sewing you into a leather sack. You can feel the rough stitching pulling closed above your head, cutting off the last rectangle of daylight. Inside with you, a dog that's already snarling, a rooster pecking frantically at the confined space, a viper coiling in the corner you can't see, and a monkey shrieking in panic. This is Pena Cule Roman punishment for killing your parents. And in about 30 seconds, they're throwing this entire nightmare into the Tiber River. You'll drown. Obviously. But first, you'll experience every animal inside this sack fighting desperately for the same air you're trying to breathe. The viper will strike. The dog will bite. The rooster will claw. The monkey will climb over your face, seeking escape. And all of it happening in darkness as water pours in. This is just number 20 on history's catalog of human cruelty. We think modern justice is harsh. We think today's punishments are extreme. History shows that humans once developed torture methods so calculated, so precisely engineered for maximum suffering, that execution would have been mercy. These weren't random acts of violence. They were systems, technologies, carefully designed mechanisms for destroying human bodies while keeping victims conscious long enough to serve as warnings. And if you think you could survive medieval Europe by simply following the rules and staying invisible, you're catastrophically wrong. Because most of these punishments weren't reserved for actual criminals. They targeted anyone authorities decided needed eliminating political enemies. Religious minorities. Women who forgot their place. Intellectuals who asked questions. So let's examine these 20 methods not as historical curiosities, but as survival lessons. Because understanding how institutional cruelty operates is the first step to avoiding it. Number 19. Drawing and quartering. England. 13th century through 1867. Reserved exclusively for treason, which could mean anything from plotting against the king to questioning religious doctrine too publicly. The process began with tying the condemned to a horse and dragging them through streets to the execution site. Already brutal. But that was just transportation. The real horror started at the gallows. Hanging. But not to death, just until consciousness began fading. Then cutting down while still alive. Disembowelment while watching your own intestines removed. Castration. Beheading. Finally, quartering limbs tied to different horses, each driven in opposite directions until the body literally tore apart. The 4 quarters were displayed in different parts of the city as permanent warnings. This wasn't about punishment. It was about making resistance so terrifying that nobody would dare attempt it. Survival lesson. In systems employing public torture as deterrence, visibility is fatal. The people who survived medieval treason accusations weren't those who loudly proclaimed innocence. They were the ones who recognized danger early and fled before. Charges were formalized. Once you're accused of treason, once you're in custody, there's no appealing to reason or justice. The machinery has already started. The only survival strategy is preventing accusations through strategic invisibility and maintaining networks that provide early warning when authorities are looking for scapegoats. Number 18. Lingqi Death by 1,000 Cuts. Ancient China. 10th century through 1905. The condemned was tied to a post while executioners methodically removed pieces of skin and flesh, one cut at a time. The skill involved keeping victims alive and conscious through hundreds of cuts, sometimes over multiple days. The final cut targeted the heart or achieved decapitation, but only after prolonged, measured destruction. The brilliance, if we can use that word for such horror, was calibration. Too fast, and the deterrent effect was lost. Too slow, and victims died from shock before the public lesson was complete. Executioners studied human anatomy to understand exactly how much damage could be inflicted before vital functions ceased. This wasn't sadism. It was science applied to cruelty. Survival lesson. Societies that develop prolonged torture methods are signaling that they value deterrence over justice. In such systems, being accused is effectively being convicted. Your best defense isn't proving innocence, it's avoiding accusation entirely through understanding what behaviors authorities consider threatening. Number 17. Cropping of ears. This seemed almost merciful compared to others, just cutting off ears rather than killing. But that appearance of mercy was calculated. The mutilation marked you permanently as a criminal. Everyone who saw you knew you'd been punished, knew you'd transgressed, knew you were dangerous or dishonorable. The punishment wasn't the pain of removal, it was decades of social death that followed. In severe cases, ears were nailed to pillories for hours before being cut off, adding public humiliation to permanent disfigurement. Many victims survived the initial punishment but died from infections. No anesthesia, no antibiotics, just open wounds, exposed to medieval filth. Survival lesson. Punishments that mark rather than kill are designed to turn victims into permanent warnings. The scarring is the point. This teaches us that in oppressive systems, even lesser punishments can be life-destroying. Sometimes quick death is preferable to surviving as a marked outcast. Understanding this helps calculate risk. Knowing that getting caught for minor offenses might result in consequences worse than death makes certain risks simply not worth taking. Number 16. Death by boiling. Emperor Nero used this on Christians in ancient Rome. King Henry VIII made it legal punishment for poisoning in 16th century England, perhaps from his own paranoid fear of being poisoned. The victim was stripped and placed in a cauldron of water, oil, or tar. Sometimes they started with cold liquid and slowly raised the temperature. Other times they were lowered directly into boiling substance. Henry VIII's reign saw victims endure up to 2 hours of this torture before dying. 2 hours of literally being cooked alive. Skin blistering and peeling. Flesh separating from bone. Nerves firing. Constant agony signals until shock or organ failure finally brought death. Survival lesson. When rulers developed torture methods reflecting their personal fears or obsessions, Henry VIII and poisoning Nero and Christians, those punishments reveal psychological vulnerabilities. Understanding what authorities fear helps predict what behaviors they'll target. In Henry's England, anyone working with food or medicine became suspect. The survival strategy wasn't avoiding the crime, it was avoiding the profession that made you plausible suspect. Number 15. Sawed in half. Roman Empire. Spain. Parts of Asia. Exactly what it sounds like. The condemned was literally sawed through lengthwise, often starting from the groin upward. Gravity ensured blood flow to the brain, keeping victims conscious longer than you'd expect. The sawing could take hours, depending on the executioner's pace and the saw's sharpness. public spectacles designed to maximize horror for observing crowds. This method reveals something about how torture serves political purposes beyond individual punishment. The extreme brutality wasn't necessary for execution, a simple beheading would suffice. The sawing was theater. It said, "We can do this to you. We have the power to destroy you so completely that your death takes hours. We can make your final moments an entertainment. Resist us, and this is your fate." Survival lesson. The more theatrical the torture, the more desperate authorities are to maintain control through fear. This paradoxically reveals weakness. Strong regimes don't need to saw people in half publicly. They're secure enough to execute quietly. When torture becomes public theater, it means the regime knows it's vulnerable and is overcompensating. Recognizing this doesn't make you safer immediately.